The crew of the Vanguard stood in awe as the mysterious structure loomed before them. The towering black obelisk was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Rising from the barren, windswept landscape, its jagged surface shimmered with an unnatural iridescence. The planet's sun cast long shadows across the site, but the stone felt alive. A subtle hum vibrated through the air, a low-frequency pulse that seemed to resonate with the core of their very being. This wasn't just an ancient relic, it was something far more alien. Commander Lysandra Quinn took the first step forward, her boots crunching against the brittle ground. Her team followed, their expressions a mixture of apprehension and awe. She'd led countless missions before, but there was something uniquely unsettling about this one. The signal had come from here, a signal unlike any they had ever decoded. The data burst had been faint, almost as if the source were hidden purposefully, buried deep within this planet's surface, waiting to be found. As they approached the structure, Dr. Emmett Reyes, the team's lead archaeologist, scanned his tablet. The encryption was complex, but he had begun to make headway. "This is it," he said quietly, his voice a whisper, though he wasn't sure why. "I think I can crack the language, but it's not just a code. It's more like an artifact embedded in the signal itself. It feels like it's alive." Quinn nodded. Reyes had never been one to exaggerate, but his words only deepened her unease. She motioned for him to proceed, but before he could, the ground beneath them rumbled. The sound was subtle at first, like the low growl of a distant storm, but it quickly escalated into something more violent. The obelisk's surface seemed to react, shifting and pulsating as though awakening from a long slumber. "Everyone, fall back," Quinn ordered, instinctively reaching for her blaster. The crew scrambled to distance themselves, but the ground shook again, this time harder. Without warning, a surge of energy crackled through the air, arcing from the obelisk's base. It engulfed the team, temporarily blinding them with a flash of white light. Their equipment short-circuited, and a high-pitched whine filled their ears. "What the hell was that?" shouted Lieutenant Soren, the team's weapons expert, as he scrambled to check his gear. His hands trembled, a rare sight from the usually unflappable soldier. His display read nothing but static. "I've lost contact with the ship," shouted Engineer Lara Zane. Her voice was filled with disbelief. "Communications are completely down. It's like someone's blocking us," Quinn finished for her, her mind racing. "The obelisk isn't just a signal, it's a barrier." Reyes, still clutching his tablet, was staring at the structure with wide eyes. "Commander, I think I can open it. The data, it's not just information, it's a key." Quinn didn't need to ask how he knew. Reyes had an instinct for ancient technology, and this was his moment to shine. But as he stepped forward, the hum from the obelisk grew louder, almost deafening. The stone seemed to warp before their eyes, a ripple of dark energy racing up its surface. The air around them crackled with malevolent energy. Before anyone could react, the ground split open beneath them, revealing an enormous stone archway within the structure, the gate. With a deep, resonating sound that echoed in their bones, the gate swung open, revealing a swirling, vortex-like expanse on the other side, a rift into something far darker than they could have imagined. The team stood frozen, gazing into the unknown. For a moment, it was silent. Then, a voice, deep and ancient, whispered through the rift, carrying with it a warning that would haunt them forever. "Welcome to hell." The moment the gate swung open, a torrent of strange, cold air rushed through the portal. It felt like an otherworldly vacuum, tugging at their lungs, pulling them into the unknown. Quinn felt a chill run down her spine as her eyes locked on the swirling abyss that had manifested before them. The rift was unlike anything they had encountered in their travels. Its edges seemed to distort, bending the very fabric of space. Within it, there was no depth, no end, only an infinite, shifting void filled with swirling, molten colors and flickers of distant fiery landscapes. "Commander, what is that?" Ray's whispered, voice barely audible over the increasing hum of the gate's energy. His tablet flickered erratically, the encrypted data now almost impossible to read. Whatever this place was, it was actively fighting to remain hidden. Quinn didn't answer immediately. She was too focused, trying to make sense of the swirling vortex before them. Her heart hammered in her chest as she took a step closer to the rift, instincts screaming at her to turn back. But there was no turning back now, not with the team so close to unraveling the mystery they had been sent here to solve. "Stay close," Quinn ordered, her voice firm, as she stepped forward with cautious resolve. The others followed, weapons drawn, their eyes darting nervously between the swirling darkness and the unpredictable, dangerous landscape before them. The air smelled of sulfur, heavy with a metallic tang, as though they had crossed some unspoken threshold. As they crossed into the rift, everything around them warped. Time, space, and reality itself seemed to twist and shift, like they were caught in the center of a cosmic storm. One moment, the ground was firm beneath their feet. The next, it rippled like water, causing their footing to falter. Their surroundings blurred, colors and shapes flashing by too fast to comprehend. It was as though they were falling through space, yet there was no sense of motion. Then, abruptly, the distortion ceased. The team found themselves standing in a desolate, fiery wasteland. The sky above was an ominous, swirling crimson, filled with dark clouds that seemed to pulse with malice. Jagged mountains rose on the horizon, their peaks glowing with molten lava, and the ground beneath them was cracked and blackened, like the remnants of an ancient battlefield. "What the hell is this place?" Lieutenant Soren muttered, his voice tight with disbelief. "This isn't a planet. This is something else. Some kind of prison?" Quinn nodded, scanning the horizon. The landscape looked like a twisted reflection of the hellish stories whispered about in ancient myths. But this was no myth. It was real, and they had just walked straight into it. "Whatever it is, it's not natural," Zane added, glancing nervously around. Her hands were trembling slightly as she checked her equipment, confirming that nothing was functioning properly. The comms were down completely, and their navigation systems had gone haywire. Reyes was already examining the surroundings, his tablet flashing with garbled data. This isn't a natural world. This place was constructed. And it's alive in a way that's unlike anything we've ever encountered." Before anyone could respond, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A low, rumbling growl echoed from the distance, followed by a chorus of eerie, shrill screeches. The team snapped into defensive positions, weapons raised, hearts pounding as they instinctively stepped closer to Quinn. "Stay alert," she ordered, her voice steady despite the rising tension. "This place isn't abandoned. Whatever made it is still here." Then, from the distance, something moved, something large, shifting across the horizon, silhouetted against the fiery backdrop. It was too far away to make out clearly, but the shape was unmistakable. The creatures of this realm had sensed their arrival, and they were coming. The team stood frozen as the shadow on the horizon grew larger, its shape becoming more distinct. It was a massive, hulking figure, humanoid but grotesquely distorted, with limbs that seemed far too long and twisted to be natural. It moved slowly, but the ground trembled with each step. The screeches from the surrounding landscape grew louder, almost deafening, as other creatures began to stir from the ashes and ruins, drawn to the newcomers like predators scenting fresh meat. "We need to move now," Quinn barked, her instincts kicking in. Her team fell into formation, weapons ready, scanning every direction. The creatures, whatever they were getting closer. Quinn's heart raced, but her mind remained sharp. This wasn't just a survival mission anymore. It was a race against time to find answers before they became part of this hellish world's legacy. Suddenly, there was a sharp crackle of energy in the air, followed by an ear-splitting sound like thunder. The team instinctively crouched, shielding themselves from the shockwave. When the noise faded, the rumbling ceased, and everything was still. From the smoke and haze ahead, a figure emerged, a towering, armored being that seemed to step out of the very stone itself. It was humanoid, but its body was encased in ancient, weathered armor. The creature's face, if it could be called that, was obscured behind a strange, glowing visor. In one hand, it carried a massive sword that glowed with a faint, eerie light. It did not speak, but its presence exuded a commanding authority, like an ancient sentinel risen from a forgotten age. Quinn's fingers tightened around her weapon, but she didn't raise it. The air around the Guardian seemed to pulse with an odd energy, a magnetic field that hummed with power. Despite the creature's intimidating appearance, there was something familiar about it, something that gave her a momentary pause. The Guardian spoke, its voice deep and resonant, like the rumble of thunder itself. "You trespass upon the domain of the void." Reyes stepped forward, his eyes wide in disbelief. Are you one of the Archon?" he asked, voice trembling with awe. The Guardian tilted its head, as if considering the question. "The Archon no longer exist. I was their protector, bound to this place by the will of those who sealed the beast." It took a step closer, its glowing visor locking onto Quinn. "You are not the first to disturb this place, but you may be the last." Quinn straightened, her hand still resting on her sidearm, but she held her ground. "We came here to understand what happened to the Archon. We're not here to understand?" The Guardian's voice boomed, and a low, dangerous growl emanated from somewhere deep within its chest. The Archon's knowledge was a curse, not a gift. They sought to control forces beyond their comprehension, forces that could not be contained. Soren lowered his weapon slightly, glancing nervously at Quinn. "What exactly are you saying? What happened here?" The Guardian's gaze seemed to pierce through them all. The Archon were not mere conquerors. They were scholars, creators, and custodians, but they made a terrible mistake. In their quest for power, they freed something ancient, a thing that was never meant to walk this universe. Quinn narrowed her eyes. "The beast." "The beast of the void," the Guardian confirmed, the name echoing through the air like a curse. "It was imprisoned here, within this dimension, by the combined will of the Archon and their greatest guardians. But now, the seals are weakening. You have triggered the awakening. The beast is stirring." Reyes' voice dropped to a whisper. "And what do you want from us?" The Guardian's glowing visor seemed to focus intently on him. "I am bound by oath to stop the beast's return." "You." It paused, as though considering the weight of its next words. "You must help me reseal it, or it will consume everything. It is not a creature that can be slain. It must be bound again, forever." The ground beneath them quaked again, a distant howl rising from the depths of the landscape. The creatures, now in full view, began to move closer, their glowing eyes fixed on the team. "We must act quickly," the Guardian warned, its tone urgent. "The beast is not just a mindless force of destruction. It is a being of knowledge, ancient knowledge. It will seek to manipulate you, to turn you into its servants, if you allow it." Quinn's mind raced. The beast, was it just a creature, or something more? She couldn't ignore the possibility that they were facing something beyond their understanding, something with the power to reshape the universe itself. But one thing was clear: if they failed, everything they knew would be wiped away in an instant. "Tell us what we need to do," Quinn said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear creeping into her chest. The Guardian's sword raised, its blade glowing brighter. "Follow me, if you wish to survive." The Guardian led them forward, its towering form moving through the hellish landscape with eerie precision. Every step it took caused the ground to tremble, and the air thickened with an oppressive, suffocating heat. As they moved deeper into the wasteland, the creatures, nightmarish, twisted forms that seemed part beast, part shadow, followed at a distance, watching them from the ruins and skeletal trees that jutted from the cracked earth like ancient, skeletal fingers. Quinn motioned for her team to stay sharp. They were in enemy territory now, and every second counted. There was no telling what would happen if the beast fully awakened, but Quinn's gut told her they were on borrowed time. The guardian's voice echoed through the oppressive silence. We move quickly. The closer we get, the stronger the beast's influence will become. You may begin to see things that aren't real, visions, whispers. Do not trust them. The beast feeds on doubt. Reyes glanced at Quinn, his face pale with a mixture of awe and fear. Do you think the beast can manipulate us, like the guardian said? I'm not sure, but we can't take that risk, Quinn replied, her gaze never leaving the distant horizon. Ahead, a colossal mountain range loomed, its jagged peaks wreathed in dark, swirling clouds. This was where the guardian was leading them, the heart of the rift, the place where the beast had been imprisoned eons ago. The ground beneath their feet grew more unstable, shifting like quicksand. Every step felt as though they were walking on the edge of a chasm. Quinn's mind raced. How had the Archon built something so resilient? And why had they chosen to imprison such a powerful entity here, in this twisted dimension? And why hadn't the Guardian spoken more about the beast's true nature? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp, bone-chilling screech. From the darkness ahead, a massive creature emerged. Its long, serpentine body coiled like a spring, covered in scales that shimmered in the fiery light. It was a grotesque blend of insect and reptile, with too many limbs and multiple eyes that glowed with an eerie green light. It hissed as it darted forward with terrifying speed, its claws scraping against the stone as it lunged at the team. "Move," Quinn shouted, instinctively pushing Reyes behind her as she raised her weapon and fired. The creature recoiled, its skin sizzling as the energy blast tore into it, but it was not deterred. It roared, its multiple mouths opening to reveal rows of serrated teeth that dripped with venom. The air itself seemed to vibrate with its fury. Soren was the first to respond, unleashing a series of rapid shots that struck the creature in its vulnerable underbelly. It screeched again, more violently this time, but before it could retaliate, the Guardian moved with incredible speed, its sword flashing through the air in a blur. The blade cut through the creature's torso with ease, severing it in half with one swift strike. The creature's body collapsed into a pile of blackened ash, disintegrating as quickly as it had appeared. "Stay focused," the Guardian said, its voice as cold as the grave. "This place is full of them. The beast calls them its servants. They will stop at nothing to prevent you from reaching the mountain." Quinn gritted her teeth, nodding. They hadn't come this far to be stopped by monsters. She motioned for the team to continue, but the encounter had rattled everyone. The beast's influence was already starting to show itself, warping the creatures of this dimension into something more monstrous with every passing moment. As they pressed on, the landscape began to change. The terrain grew more treacherous, with fissures opening beneath their feet, spewing geysers of black smoke and fire. It was as if the very land itself was protesting their presence. The sky above them was no longer a uniform shade of red, but now pulsed with deep, throbbing streaks of black and violet, like the veins of some ancient dying creature. "Commander," Reyes whispered urgently, pulling Quinn aside. His voice was tight with fear. I'm starting to see things. There's something moving in the sky. It's like shadows, but not shadows. They're watching us." Quinn turned to follow his gaze, but saw nothing. "Keep it together, Reyes. This place is trying to mess with your head. Focus on the mission. We have to keep moving." The Guardian didn't slow its pace, its movements precise as it led them into the depths of the valley. The air was thick with the scent of sulfur, the ground beneath them growing increasingly unstable. Ahead, the jagged peaks of the mountain were now shrouded in darkness, an impenetrable cloud that seemed to twist and distort with unnatural energy. "This is it," the Guardian said, its voice low, almost reverent. "The beast's prison is at the heart of the mountain. But beware, it is no ordinary prison. The walls are not made of stone or metal. They are made of the will of the Archon, bound by power that you will not understand until you see it. and once you do, you may wish you had never come." The landscape had transformed into something even more alien as they drew closer to the base of the mountain. The ground was no longer simply cracked and desolate. Now, deep chasms seemed to open at random, and the air shimmered with a strange, oppressive weight. It felt as though the very atmosphere was charged with static, a constant low hum resonating through their bodies like an unspoken threat. The team's footsteps were muffled, as if the mountain itself absorbed sound, adding to the suffocating silence. "Stay close," Quinn commanded, her voice steady despite the growing sense of unease gnawing at her. Her eyes darted around, alert for any movement, but there was nothing, no sign of creatures, no flicker of life, save for their own. The Guardian, however, did not stop. It continued to lead them deeper into the heart of the mountain, its every movement deliberate, its sword glowing faintly with a bluish light that illuminated the twisted path ahead. Quinn could see it now. What had once appeared to be jagged peaks was, in truth, a colossal, alien structure embedded in the rock itself. Its spires reached into the sky like ancient, petrified trees, and the stone was dark, almost black, as though it had been scorched by an unimaginable heat long ago. As they ventured deeper into the ruins, the ground seemed to shift beneath them, and Quinn's mind kept racing. Had the Archon truly built this place? How could something so massive, so intricate, have existed here for eons without any trace of the civilization that created it? Ray's voice broke through her thoughts. "Commander, I'm seeing something in the stone. Symbols. I think they're from the Archon. They look like they're alive, moving." Quinn's gaze snapped to the rock formations around them. At first, it looked like nothing more than ancient carvings, simple etchings that adorned the walls, but as Ray's pointed them out, she could see it. The symbols were shifting, pulsating with an otherworldly energy. The air around them thickened as the stone seemed to come alive, flowing like liquid, as if the mountain itself were a living, breathing organism. "We're close," the Guardian intoned, its voice low and reverberating with power. "The prison lies beyond this chamber, but be warned, the beast's influence has already begun to seep through the walls. It will try to break your minds before it breaks your bodies." Quinn nodded grimly, signaling the team to move forward. The Guardian raised its sword high, and the glowing blade cut through the darkness, revealing a massive, arching door at the far end of the cavern. The door was made of the same shifting stone as the walls, but now there was a dark energy swirling around it, as if some forbidden power had taken root there. They stepped forward in unison, their footsteps slow and deliberate as they approached the door. As Quinn's hand reached out to touch the surface, a sudden surge of energy shot through her, a shockwave of fear and despair that rattled her to the core. It was as though something ancient, something terrible, had awoken within her mind. A voice, low, guttural, and incomprehensible, whispered in her ears the sound of 1,000 tortured souls. "Welcome, Commander," it breathed, a cold, mocking tone curling through her thoughts. "Welcome to your end." Quinn staggered back, her breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. She clenched her fists, trying to focus, to shake off the creeping sense of dread that threatened to consume her. The voice was not hers. It was the beast's, a malignant presence that sought to tear her apart from the inside out. "Stay strong," the Guardian's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. "The beast will use your fear against you. Do not let it." Ray's grabbed her arm, his face pale. "Commander, we need to get inside. This place, it's alive, and it's trying to break us down." Quinn nodded, shaking off the voice as best she could. She had to remain in control. She had to push forward, for the sake of her crew, and for the fate of the universe itself. With a determined breath, she turned to the door, raising her hand to press against the stone once more. This time, there was no hesitation. The symbols on the surface shifted violently, and the door began to open, revealing a vast chamber beyond. Inside, the air was thick with the stench of decayed age, and at the far end of the chamber, Bound by chains of dark energy lay something unimaginable. Its form was obscured by shadow, but even from this distance, Quinn could feel its presence, its power radiating like a black hole. It was as though the very essence of despair and destruction had been harnessed and trapped in this dark place for eternity. But the prison was no longer holding. The beast was waking up. The chamber felt suffocating, as though the air itself was thickening with each passing second. The walls, once smooth and impenetrable, now pulsed with an eerie, dark energy that resonated in Quinn's bones. The beast's presence was undeniable, an oppressive weight pressing against her chest, as if every breath she took stirred the malevolent force that lay just beyond the veil of darkness. As they stepped inside, the door slammed shut behind them with a deafening thud, trapping them in the heart of the prison. The cold, otherworldly silence fell over the group, broken only by the hum of the Guardian's sword, which continued to glow softly in the oppressive gloom. The shadows in the room seemed to swirl, thick and viscous, as though they had a life of their own. Quinn's eyes darted across the chamber, scanning for any sign of movement. In the farthest corner of the room, bound by chains of shimmering, violet energy, lay the beast. It was an enormous, shadowy figure, barely distinguishable in the swirling darkness that surrounded it. Its form shifted constantly, like a mirage, warping and bending with every flicker of light, but Quinn could see the outline, tall, ancient, and impossibly powerful. The beast was no longer dormant. Quinn could feel it in the air, the power of a being that was older than the stars themselves, a creature forged in the depths of the void, waiting for centuries to escape its prison. And now its chains were weakening. The beast has always been here. The Guardian's voice reverberated through the chamber, its tone grave. But it was bound by the combined will of the Archon and their greatest guardians. They trapped it here to contain its hunger. The seals that held are breaking now, and you must act before it's too late. Ray stepped forward, his eyes wide, unable to take his gaze off the dark form that loomed ahead. What do we do? How do we stop it? The Guardian turned slowly, its glowing visor meeting Quinn's gaze. There is no stopping it. The beast cannot be slain. It must be bound again, before it consumes everything. Quinn's mind raced. There had to be a way. They couldn't just let this creature, this force of annihilation, be released back into the universe. How do we rebind it? She demanded. The Guardian's sword pulsed with light as it raised it toward the beast. The chains can be reforged, but only with the same power that bound it in the first place. You must use the energy of the void itself, channeling it through the heart of this prison. The Arcane were masters of this technique, but it requires a sacrifice. Quinn's stomach churned. She had feared it would come to this. There was always a cost, a price for dealing with forces this ancient and powerful. And if we don't? She asked, her voice tight. The Guardian's voice dropped to a low whisper. The beast will break free, and the universe will burn. It will corrupt everything, turning it into its own twisted image. Reality itself will unravel. A low rumble echoed through the chamber, like the growl of a slumbering animal. The beast stirred, its massive form shifting in the shadows. The chains that bound it began to pulse with dark energy, their glow flickering in and out, the power waning with each passing moment. Quinn swallowed hard, her fingers tightening around her weapon. We don't have much time. We need to act, now. The air in the room crackled with an unbearable tension as the beast's dark energy began to bleed through its restraints. It let out a terrifying roar, a sound that seemed to reverberate through every molecule of air, shaking the very foundations of the chamber. The ground trembled violently beneath them, and the walls cracked as if in response to the beast's growing power. Suddenly, the chains snapped. The beast's roar filled the room, shaking the team to their core, and Quinn felt a rush of cold dread seep into her veins. She saw the shadows moving, coiling around them like living tendrils, seeking to bind them in place. The Guardian lunged forward, its sword raised high, and a surge of light poured from it, striking the beast's form with a blinding burst of energy. But it wasn't enough. The beast's form writhed, and the chains began to reconfigure, reshaping themselves into a new pattern. A pattern of madness and corruption, one that Quinn realized was no longer part of the Archon's design. "It's learning," she whispered, eyes wide with horror. "It's adapting." The Guardian turned toward them, its voice sharp and commanding. "You must use the power of the void. It is the only way." Ray shook his head, panic creeping into his voice. "We can't. We don't have the strength." The beast's form began to coalesce, a massive, shadowy presence taking shape before their eyes. Its eyes, if they could be called that, glowed with a malevolent, violet light, burning with hunger. It was no longer a prisoner, it was the predator, and they were its prey. Quinn's heart pounded in her chest as the beast focused its gaze on them. The last remnants of its chains glowed faintly as the creature took a step toward them, a horrifying, otherworldly force rising in the air. This was no longer a battle of strength or weapons. It was a battle of wills. And Quinn knew only one would emerge victorious. The room had become a battleground of light and shadow, the very air crackling with the violent energy of the beast's awakening. The once solid chains that had bound it for eons were now nothing but glowing fragments, disintegrating into the void like ash caught in the wind. The beast's eyes, dark and hollow yet burning with malevolent intent, locked onto the team, and for the first time, Quinn felt the weight of its full presence. It was not merely a creature, it was a force of destruction, a singular, relentless entity that existed outside the bounds of normal space and time. The shadows that poured from its body stretched across the room, coiling around the walls, turning the stone into a living nightmare. It was as if the beast itself was warping reality to suit its will, reshaping the world around them into something darker, more twisted. Quinn felt it, the pressure, the overwhelming force. Her mind began to fracture, her thoughts slowing, her limbs feeling heavy, as if an invisible weight was pressing down on her chest. The beast was reaching into their minds, trying to crack them open, to turn their own fear against them. But she fought it back. "Don't give in," Quinn shouted, though her voice felt distant, barely escaping the crushing weight of the beast's influence. "Focus on the mission. We have to rebind it." Soren, his face pale and strained, nodded grimly, his weapon still raised, though he knew it was useless against the entity before them. Reyes, on the other hand, appeared to be in a trance, his eyes vacant, and Quinn realized with a sickening lurch that he was being affected more than anyone else. The beast was manipulating him, weaving false visions into his mind, illusions designed to fracture his resolve. "Reyes," she cried, grabbing him by the shoulders, shaking him fiercely. "Reyes, you need to snap out of it." His eyes focused for a brief moment, but the terror in his gaze said it all. I see the future," he whispered, his voice breaking. "It's all just death. Nothing survives. The beast will consume everything." Quinn's heart pounded in her chest as she looked back toward the beast. Its form was growing, expanding, its presence filling the entire chamber, its voice now like a deafening roar within her mind. "Foolish mortals, you think you can stop me? You cannot. I am endless. I will consume your hopes, your dreams, your very souls." The words echoed in her mind, the beast's dark power pressing on her thoughts like a vice, but she pushed back. She couldn't afford to falter now. The ritual, the binding ritual, was their only hope, and she had to believe that it could work. "We need to use the void's energy," Quinn said, more to herself than to the others, but the words seemed to spark something in her. If the Guardian had said the only way to rebind the beast was to channel the power of the void through the heart of the prison, then she needed to focus on that. The very energy that had held the beast for centuries was still here, hidden within the stone, within the fabric of the prison itself. The Guardian raised its sword, the blade glowing brighter than ever. "We must all be a part of the binding. The void's energy does not belong to any one of us. It is shared. All of you must focus on it. Together." Quinn's eyes widened as she understood. The beast had been trapped here by the combined will of the Archon and their greatest guardians, but now it was their turn. Their collective resolve, their unity, was the key to stopping it. She motioned to her team. "Get close, we'll do this together." Soren and Reyes, though clearly struggling against the beast's influence, obeyed, gathering around Quinn. The Guardian stood beside them, its presence a constant reminder of what was at stake. Together, they formed a tight circle in the center of the chamber. And as they did, the shadows of the beast writhed violently, as though it sensed what was about to happen. Quinn closed her eyes, reaching out with her mind, focusing on the pulsing energy around them. She felt it, an undercurrent of power, faint but present, woven into the very fabric of the stone. It was the void, the source of the beast's imprisonment. It had been dormant for so long, but now it called to them. "Focus on the power," the Guardian said, its voice a soothing force amid the chaos. "Channel it. The void is a force of creation and destruction. Use its energy to rebind the beast, to seal it once again." Quinn extended her hands toward the stone beneath them, her fingers trembling as she felt the raw energy surge through her. She could feel it, like a vast ocean of power, flowing through her, through the entire group. The weight of it threatened to drown her, but she held firm, focusing on the task at hand. She wasn't alone in this. Each of them was a part of this binding, and their collective strength would hold. Reyes' hand was shaking, but he joined in, his voice a whisper in the growing maelstrom. "For the universe, for everything we know." The chamber began to glow, the void's energy swirling around them, coalescing into a singular point. The beast howled in rage, its form now an enormous, undulating mass of darkness, its shadowy tendrils reaching toward them like claws. But they were ready. Together, they began to focus the energy, channeling it through the heart of the mountain, through the void, and into the beast. The shadows receded, the darkness began to burn away, and the beast's cries turned into a scream of pure agony as the power of the binding ritual took hold. The chains were formed. The beast's form cracked and shattered, its power reabsorbed by the prison that had once held it. And as the light intensified, Quinn felt the oppressive weight lifting, the darkness receding, until silence. The silence that followed the beast's binding was deafening. For a moment, Quinn stood in the heart of the chamber, the energy of the void still humming around her, but fading. The oppressive weight of the beast's influence lifted, leaving only a deep, resonant quiet. The chamber, once filled with the roiling darkness of a world on the brink of destruction, was now still eerily so. Quinn's breath came in ragged gasps as she let the energy ebb from her hands still trembling from the raw force they had channeled. She felt the lingering weight of the ritual, the exhaustion of drawing from the void, of binding such a powerful entity. But for the first time since entering the prison, she allowed herself a brief moment of relief. "We did it," Ray said, his voice hoarse, but steady now, the wild fear in his eyes replaced by something calmer, though still haunted. Quinn turned to him, offering a tight smile. "We did." But as her gaze swept across the room, she saw the price of their victory. Soren was slumped against the stone wall, his breathing shallow, his face pale. The Guardian was motionless, its glowing sword flickering weakly, its once strong presence diminished. The ritual had drained them all more than they could have anticipated. The power of the void had been immense, but it had taken a toll on each of them. "We need to get out of here," Quinn said, her voice resolute as she walked over to Soren, crouching beside him. "Can you move?" He nodded weakly, his eyes unfocused, and she helped him to his feet. Reyes was already at the other end of the room, checking on the Guardian, whose form was crumpled in a way that suggested it was more than just tired, it was near its limit. The Guardian had sacrificed its energy, its life force, to ensure the beast was sealed away once more. "It's done," the Guardian rasped, its voice barely above a whisper. "The beast is bound, but I cannot continue." Don't say that, Quinn replied urgently, her hand hovering near the Guardian's glowing armor. We can help you. But the Guardian's form flickered, the light dimming even further. No, I was made for this purpose, Commander. I have served my function. My duty is complete. Quinn's chest tightened, and for a moment, she felt the weight of its sacrifice. The Guardian had given everything to ensure their success. Without it, they might not have been able to bind the beast. The Void's energy had been too great, and only the Guardian's guidance and strength had made it possible. I'll remember you, Quinn said quietly. We all will. The Guardian's head tilted as if acknowledging her words. Remember, the power of the Void is not to be trifled with. It is an energy of balance between creation and destruction. You must never forget the price of such power. The light in the Guardian's eyes dimmed one final time, and its form crumbled into a pile of dust, as though the very essence of it had been absorbed by the Void. A mournful silence followed, and Quinn stood, staring down at the remains of their ally, feeling the weight of that sacrifice. It's over, Soren said softly, looking at the pile of dust where the Guardian had once stood. But at what cost? Quinn didn't have an answer. She didn't know if the universe would ever fully recover from the destruction and the chaos they had unleashed. They had saved countless lives by binding the beast, but they had also experienced the true price of such power. We've done what we had to do, Quinn said, her voice steady, but there was a tinge of sorrow in her words. Now we need to get back and make sure the damage is contained. We'll rebuild. The chamber around them was silent once more, the only sound now the faint echo of their footsteps as they made their way back toward the exit. The landscape outside the mountain was no less desolate. The ruin of a once mighty civilization spread out before them, but for the first time in what felt like an eternity, Quinn felt the tiniest spark of hope. They had saved the universe. They had stopped the beast. But in the end, they would never forget the cost.